Somewhere in the hill country of central Texas, there is a rancher who has not bought a single bag of commercial feed supplement in 11 years. His cattle are fat. His pastures are thick. His neighbors, working the same clay soil under the same brutal summer sun, are spending thousands every season just to keep their herds from losing condition. The difference between his land and theirs is not rainfall. It is not luck. It is not a secret mineral formula ordered from a catalog. It is something sitting underneath every acre of grass on earth, something that has been quietly dismantled on most American farmland over the last 70 years, and something that can be rebuilt for almost nothing once a person understands what it actually is. The global livestock supplement industry is worth more than $45 billion a year. It grows reliably year after year because the problem it claims to solve never fully goes away. Animals eat the supplements, producers buy more supplements, the pasture underneath never fundamentally changes, and the cycle repeats indefinitely. That is not a coincidence. That is a revenue model. But scattered across the country, in the hill country of Texas, in the Ozarks of Missouri, in the river valleys of Kentucky, there are ranchers and small farmers who stepped off that treadmill a long time ago. They are not doing something radical. They are doing something old. And the agricultural science now validating what they figured out through observation and patience is some of the most compelling research coming out of land-grant universities today. Here is exactly what they know, and how any livestock keeper, from a backyard chicken flock to a working cattle operation, can start using it. The first thing to understand is what went wrong in the first place, because without that, none of the solutions make complete sense. For most of recorded human history, livestock and land existed in a relationship. Animals grazed, they moved, they returned nutrients to the soil in the form of manure and urine, and the land recovered before they came back. That rhythm, movement followed by rest, followed by regrowth, is the cycle every grassland ecosystem on Earth evolved around. The deep root systems of native grasses, some of them pushing 6 and 8 feet into the subsoil, existed specifically because periodic intense grazing followed by long recovery is what triggered them to grow deeper and store more energy. The soil underneath those grasslands was built by that cycle over thousands of years into something extraordinary. Dark, dense with organic matter, teeming with microbial life, and capable of holding moisture through drought conditions that would turn modern pastures to dust. Then came continuous grazing. The fencing revolution of the late 1800s allowed livestock to be held on fixed acreage year-round. Animals grazed the same ground over and over without the movement and without the recovery. The grasses that evolved for periodic intense pressure and long rest were steadily replaced by shorter, weaker species that could survive constant cropping. Root systems shallowed, organic matter in the soil dropped. The microbial communities that made nutrients available to plants collapsed, and as the land produced less, the instinct was to supplement more, to pour the nutrition back in through bags and bottles rather than to address why the land stopped producing it in the first place. Researchers at the Rodale Institute studying this transition found that continuously grazed pastures lose between 1 and 3% of their soil organic matter per decade. That sounds small until you understand that a single percentage point of organic matter in the top 6 inches of an acre of soil represents roughly 10,000 pounds of carbon, water holding capacity, and biological activity. It is not a small number, and once it is gone, no supplement replaces what it was doing. The rancher in central Texas understood this, not from a university paper, but from watching his own land. He noticed that the corners of his pastures, the areas cattle could not easily reach, were darker and softer than the areas that got grazed every day. He noticed that after a rain, the ungrazed corners absorbed the water and the grazed areas shed it. He started asking why. The answer led him to a practice now backed by decades of peer-reviewed research. It is called adaptive multi-paddock grazing, and the principle behind it is almost offensively simple. It is just the original relationship between animals and land, rebuilt on purpose. The pasture gets divided into smaller sections. Livestock rotate through those sections at high density for short periods, sometimes just 1 or 2 days on a given paddock. Then the animals move and the paddock rests. Rest periods of 60 to 90 days allow grasses to fully recover, push roots deeper, and rebuild the leaf area that drives photosynthesis and organic matter production. University of Georgia research tracking farms that switched to this system found that after 3 years, soil organic matter had increased measurably. After 5 years, the difference in pasture productivity between adaptive grazed land and continuously grazed land on the same soil type was significant enough that the adaptive grazed farms were consistently running higher stocking rates with less purchased input. The land was feeding the animals again instead of the feed store. But rotation alone is only part of the picture. What comes back onto the pasture alongside the animals matters just as much, and this is where a second practice comes in that most conventional livestock advisors never mention. Livestock manure is one of the most nutrient-dense biological materials on Earth. But the way manure behaves once it hits the ground depends almost entirely on what is living in the soil underneath it. In biologically active soil, a fresh manure pat is colonized by dung beetles within hours. Dung beetles are not a curiosity, they are an essential part of the nutrient cycle. A single dung beetle colony working through a season can bury and incorporate the manure from an entire cow herd, pulling it into the soil profile where plant roots can access it, rather than letting it oxidize and volatilize at the surface. Research from Texas A&M University estimated that dung beetle activity on a cattle operation can reduce nitrogen loss from surface manure by up to 90%. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between nutrients cycling back into the pasture and nutrients evaporating into the air while the rancher buys more supplement to replace them. Dung beetles collapse in chemically treated animals. The ivermectin and other antiparasitic compounds that pass through treated livestock are toxic to the beetles and their larvae. This is not a controversial finding. It has been documented in research going back 30 years. The practical implication is uncomfortable because parasite management is a real and legitimate need in livestock production, but the farms that have navigated this successfully have done it by moving toward targeted selective treatment, treating only animals showing clinical signs of parasite burden rather than blanket whole herd dosing on a calendar schedule, and by using fecal egg counts to guide decisions rather than rotating products on a fixed schedule regardless of whether parasites are actually present. The dung beetle populations recover when chemical pressure eases. The manure nutrient cycle comes back online, and in several documented cases, the parasite pressure itself declined because the faster manure burial by beetles reduced the window during which larvae on the pasture surface could survive and reinfect grazing animals. The biology solved part of the problem the chemistry was creating. There is a third piece that ties everything together, and it lives in the water. Healthy, biologically active soil in a well-managed pasture behaves like a sponge. It absorbs rainfall, holds it in the pore spaces between soil aggregates, and releases it slowly to plant roots over days and weeks after the rain has passed. Degraded, compacted, biologically depleted soil behaves like a parking lot. Water sheets off the surface, carries topsoil with it, and the pasture is dry again within days of a rain event. The difference in drought resilience between these two soil types is enormous, and it is measurable. Research published by the Savory Institute comparing managed and conventionally grazed land in the same climate zone found that well-managed pasture with higher organic matter retained significantly more plant-available water through dry periods, meaning the grasses kept growing when conventionally managed pastures had already gone dormant and animals were being moved to lot feeding or sold off at distressed prices. The practical implication for any livestock keeper, regardless of scale, comes back to the same place every time. The land is the input. Everything else, the supplements, the hay, the purchased feed, exists to compensate for what the land is no longer able to provide on its own. The ranchers who understood this, who invested their energy in rebuilding the biology instead of indefinitely supplementing around its absence, found that the compensation bill got smaller every year instead of larger, not because they found a cheaper supplement, because the land started doing again what land, given the chance, was always designed to do. There is something that happens when a person starts seeing a pasture the way these ranchers do. It stops looking like a backdrop for the animals. It starts looking like the animal itself. A living system that has needs and rhythms and a capacity for recovery that most people managing it have never given it the chance to show. The cattle in good years and hard years alike will reflect exactly what is happening 6 inches below the surface of the ground they walk on. Feed the ground and the ground feeds them back. That is not a philosophy, that is agronomy. And every technique in this video costs less than another season of supplements, while quietly building something that will outlast every animal that grazes it. A pasture that grows darker and deeper and more alive every single year, not despite the animals walking on it, but because of the way they are allowed to walk on it.